a little bit of another stencil over it, which isn't raised. So we have raised detail and non-raised detail on the same piece. And a lot of people have questions about embellishing and all of that, so we're going to go over that, and then we're going to make raised and 3D stencils today. So when you have a raised stencil like this, a lot of people are worried about how to embellish this. The easiest way to embellish it is to put your stencil back over your piece and do your embellishing there, because if you put your stencil back over your piece, then while you're embellishing your piece, like this one, we embellished it with gilding wax, bronze gilding wax. And if you put your stencil back over it, then you don't run the risk of getting any of your gilding wax anywhere you don't want it to be. You just lay your stencil right back over that, take your stencil brush, your finger, or whatever, and go right back over it. Then when you remove this, guess what? It's all done. So it's super easy to do, and you don't run the risk of messing up any of your other finishes while you do that, okay? All right, so we chit-chatted about raised stencils. Hey guys, sorry, I have to have my glasses off to see some things, and I have to wear my glasses to see other things. So now I'm going to show you the difference. Prima actually makes 3D stencils, and I want you to see. Can you see how much deeper this stencil is? This is a regular stencil, and both of these stencils were created using Prima's icing. Can you see how shiny those are? Those are just a regular depth. This is a 3D stencil, and this 3D stencil actually has a little bit of Prima's pearlized icing on it. Can you see how cool that is? And of course the background color is what? Rosé. Isn't it fabulous? So I wanted you to see that. This is a 3D stencil. So I'm going to show you the difference in the two of them. All right, and then we're going to chit-chat about icing. Okay, this is a regular stencil. Dixie Belle has lots of them. This just happens to be one that I had laying around. And you can see it's very thin. The 3D stencils are much thicker, and they're put out by Prima, Redesign. And they have great depth, and you can add lots of color with those and lots of details. So I'm going to show you, when I'm doing a stencil, I love to use Dixie Belle Mud, okay? I'm old enough with Dixie Belle that I remember when it was called Swamp Mud. And a lot of times I use a regular little spackling knife, but my spackling knife that I use is a little bit wider than my piece, than my cup. So I have to get it out. Sorry, I left it in my car today when I was doing my fireplace. So it's a little, need to stir it up a little. And what I do is I take my mud and I put it actually on my piece, okay? Hold it in place with one hand and I put my mud on my piece. It looks like a big giant hot mess. But then once you take your spackling knife and you start going over it, what happens is as you press down on it, it actually catches in the grooves that are created by the stencil. Now the only difference is with a regular depth stencil, you really have to be careful that you don't wipe any out by accident, because a regular depth stencil, if it's very wide, when you use a knife like I do, a putty knife or spackling knife, whatever you want to call it, if you use this, sometimes you can accidentally wipe it out of a place that's too wide, because the depth of a regular stencil, you know, it's not much deeper than like a cardstock or something like that. But this is what I do. I like to go over it, and I go over it several different directions so that I can make sure I get it off. Now, if you know me, you know how chintzy I am. I don't like to waste any of the mud. So as I wipe it off, I put it back in there. And another little public service announcement I'm going to remind you guys, don't wash it down your sink, okay? If you wash it down your sink, you'll be sad because it will clog your pipes, okay? All right, so after I have wiped off most of my mud, using my little stick, my little tongue depressor, I like to just go right back over it and just make sure. Okay. So now once I've done that, we're using Dixie Belle's brown mud on this one. Typically I let it sit for just a minute, and after I let it sit, well, I've got one little spot here I don't like the look of. And don't do like I do. I'll mess with it sometimes until I end up messing it up. Okay, so what I usually do, I let it sit for just a minute, and then you can lift it up, but lift up at diagonal corners so that you get an even lift and you don't shift it around while you're trying to lift it up. All right, so there we go. And typically I soak my stencils in some water and in a tub, and then once they've soaked a while, then I just wash them off in that tub and pour the water outside. Okay, so there's my stencil, and it is a raised stencil. Now I'm going to tell you, if you notice any little boo-boos with the mud, don't mess with it while it's wet. Wait until it dries completely, and then take your little X-Acto knife, and boom, you can fix that right up and you won't have any problems. Okay, so now you can see it's not very deep at all. But it is great. It gives your piece some added texture. And I'll tell you what even adds more to it is if you do like I did with the other one and you add untextured things, you can add Dixie wax, Best Dang wax, add a little bit of Dixie dirt to add further texture. It is amazing what you can do with it. You can add gilding wax and everything like that. So now that is just a standard raised stencil, but you can embellish it however you'd like. Now I'm going to show you the difference. When you have a 3D stencil, when you put it on with a spackling knife, it is a much easier task because these stencils are so much deeper. It's crazy. They're probably about as deep as, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 sheets of cardstock. They're really good, but I'm going to show you with this. And like I say, if you guys haven't tried the Dixie Mud, it is amazeballs. I have to tell you, this stuff is great. I use it for everything. If I notice that a piece is missing veneer, it's great for that. I mean, there's just so many things this is good for. All right, so now we are going to wipe this over the same way. But the difference is this one is much deeper, so you don't have to be nearly so careful because you're not going to wipe it out of this one, okay? You're just not going to wipe it out, so you don't have to worry about that. And if you continue to wipe over it, then the places that are thin will fill in from the places that the excess mud is moving away from, okay? So you just want to make sure and wipe over it a couple of different directions, a couple of different ways. All right. So we're going to put this back in this little cup. All right, so now we have our mud, and you can kind of see my stencil. And that's what we want. We want to get all of the excess mud off the top. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to lift up at the opposite corners. All right. Now, I chose these backgrounds and the color of mud so that they would show up really well. This one is the 3D stencil. See, it's much deeper, and it gives them a lot of texture. Now, once you've created these stencils, if you're going to do any blending over them, before you blend over a raised stencil, since you created it with the Dixie Mud, what you're going to want to do, whether it's a 3D stencil or a raised stencil, you're going to want to do something that sets that stencil, okay? So what you're going to want to do is either clear coat it, put a coat of paint over it. If you're happier using Boss or Slick Stick or something like that, I don't know what piece you're going to put it on. Hey, Lisa, go ahead and just do that. Put something over it that's going to help solidify it, because this is just Dixie Mud, and I don't know if you guys have ever sanded it, but it sands a lot like plaster. It is very easy to use. It's very easy to handle. You can see how quickly I went over that and what great detail it gives. So you want to do something that's going to set it. Typically, I use some type of clear coat. You can spray it over it. You can brush it over it, whatever you want to do. But if you're going to blend over this, you don't want to reinvigorate your product after it's dried. Your mud needs to be set. So that's what I would recommend, putting clear coat or something over it. Now, once you've let this dry, and this will take a little while, the 3D stencil takes a few hours longer to dry than the regular stencil because it's just that much deeper. But once your product has dried completely, then you're welcome to do whatever you want to do to it. It doesn't matter whatever, however you want to embellish it. And that's why we're going to chit chat about this. We're going to talk about these embellishments. First of all, these are something that I get asked about a lot. These are icing. They're made by Prima. They're not made by Dixie Belle, but they are made by Prima, and they have great depth of color and pigment. And this one is a 3D stencil that has rosé over it, but over part of it I did use the pearlized icing, and that's what gives it some of these details. Now keep in mind, if you follow me, you know that I'm not one that really likes for the whole thing to be the same, no matter what it is. So what I like to do is I just put pearl icing over it in places. So the entire thing isn't recovered with pearl icing. It's just partial coverage so that you can see the way it reflects the light is different, but it adds another point of interest, I think, to do it like that. Now, that is one embellishment, but now this one is one that always garners attention. It is an example that's in my store, and this one we put coffee bean, and then I put gilding wax, bronze gilding wax over it, but then this part of the stenciling was done just with coffee bean. So this piece has Savannah Mist, it has Stormy Seas, it has coffee bean, it has bronze gilding wax, and I think it has hammered copper gilding wax as well. But you can see it's super easy, and like I say, when you're doing your embellishments, just make sure that you put your stencil back over it if you don't want to get it on your other piece. So that's what I wanted to go over with you guys tonight. If you have a piece that doesn't have enough detail for you, because a lot of them are kind of plain, you can always do something like this. It takes just a few minutes to do. Let it dry overnight if you're as impatient as I am, and you will have some absolutely bomb diggity details. And nobody will know that they're not carved into your piece because they look so great. Somebody had asked me what this color is. This color is actually Pure Ocean that's been washed with coffee bean. Pure Ocean and the Gulf blended, and then I washed both colors with coffee bean. So if you guys have more questions, I'm Pam with 44 Marketplace. Please reach out to your local retailer and ask them about Dixie Mud. And if you don't have a local retailer, I would love to be yours. Thanks for tuning in tonight, and I will see you next Monday. Have a great evening.